There was a young child taking an art class, and she was making a picture in the art class, and her teacher came up to her and said, "Susie, what are you making?" And Susie looked up with a big beaming smile and said, "Well, I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher, in all of her blindness, said, "Well, that's silly, Susie. Nobody knows what God looks like." And Susie, without missing a beat, without looking up from her paper, said, "Well, they will in just a minute." So what is the picture of God that you are drawing in your life? The reality is, the image you hold of this infinite spirit that we call God by many, many names, how you are viewing that entity, that spirit, that energy is affecting your life today. And that view may be very conscious. You may have a completely beautiful answer when somebody says, "Tell me about the God that you believe in." But it also could be very unconscious. And even at a deeper place, it could be in a very deep embedded theology. So we're going to explore today some of maybe the embedded theology. I'm sure none of you are going to have these ideas, but perhaps if you have learned when you were 4 and 5 about a certain God that maybe you've let go of, but there's still some energy that we need to be conscious. If we are not conscious spiritual seekers and beings, we fall into old traps. And old energy comes up from the cells of ourselves that say God is a certain thing or a certain way. And so we're going to explore those pictures that we have drawn in the past, the pictures we are drawing today, and the pictures perhaps we want to draw in the future. The reality is, if we are a spiritual student, a true spiritual student, and not an automaton, our concept of God should be evolving. It should be growing. I know more about God than I did yesterday, and I hope that tomorrow, on my journey, I can step into a greater awareness of what God is. It's one of the reasons I love unity. The founders of unity said we reserve the right to change our mind at any given moment. That's strength. That's not weakness. It was an understanding that when I put God in a box and say, "This is it, God quit speaking to me," I quit seeking and discovering, my life becomes stagnant, my spiritual life. And if your spiritual life is stagnant, guess what? Your life is stagnant. If your relationship with the divine universal essence that we call God is stagnant, your life is going to be stagnant. And I've been looking at a book that I absolutely have fallen in love with. I want to thank Ron Weiser. He's back there in the sound booth. Hey, Ron. Gave me this book. I think it's an old book, but it turned me on. It's a Quaker minister named Philip Gulley, and the book is called The Evolution of Faith. I believe Wendy has them in the bookstore. I highly, highly recommend that you get this book. But he talks about this idea of an evolving, morphing energy and relationship with the divine. And the reality is we're only one idea, one feeling, one thought, one experience away from those embedded theology that we've been holding, or from a new awareness of what life can be and what God can be in our life. Faith is not meant to be stagnant. It is meant to be growing, and with growing comes questioning. How many have ever considered in your past maybe experiences that questioning is an imperative spiritual practice? If you are not questioning, you're not growing. If you are not challenging the status quo, you're not growing. That's one of the reasons I love unity. We come here to get our questions answered, but my greatest growth comes from getting my answers questioned. We wrestle with God. We wrestle with the ideas of God, and by wrestling and going to deep, dark places sometimes, a new idea emerges, a new divine idea. Here's what Gulley writes, and I'm going to use several quotes from the book. Hopefully that'll turn you on as much as it turned me on. He writes, "The more adamant we are about God, the less likely we are to embody the traits we believe God values. What if rightness were of secondary importance, and what was paramount was the freedom to investigate uncharted spiritual ground?" I love that. Shouldn't God be approached with less certainty and more open-mindedness? Wow. Yes. The answer, the Reader's Digest answer is yes. So I want to explore today some of those embedded theologies, some of the ways that teachers and maybe parents and grandparents introduced us to the idea of God that we might still be playing in our life. Start with the most basic and primitive view of God that we hear all over the place. How many were introduced at any point in your life to the angry God? The God of vengeance. This energy of God was someone to be feared or something to be feared. And you lived your life in fear. I remember growing up as a child being much more afraid of God than I was of Satan. Because God, as my Father, had designed a personalized torture chamber for me. If I didn't do things correctly, I was afraid. I used to have this view of God as the boogeyman under my bed. I didn't have a boogeyman in the closet or under the bed. I had God. It's not necessarily the greatest place to live. It's a fearful place. It's a stressful place. Now, it is a wonderful way to create an obedient follower. It's a great way to get somebody to live from a guilty sense of morality and obedience, to line up the way we need you to line up in my safe little box. Welcome to my box. As long as you play in my box, we're going to be getting along just fine. It's not a great place to live. Gully writes, when our primary identity is that of sinner. You see, this angry God, it is organically, we have to see ourselves as stained. We have to see ourselves as less than, born in original brokenness. It says, when our primary identity is that of a sinner, we invariably descend to that low calling. If you have a view of yourself that you are broken in any way, that when you were born onto this planet that you were less than perfect, whole, and complete, your life is going to show up to absolutely prove you right. You are broken. You're going to attract relationships that are going to prove to you that you are stained, that you're not worthy, that you are less than. Because in unity we teach it's all one. It's all God. Yes? So your life is a manifestation of God. And if you are holding God as angry, as something to be afraid of, guess what? You're going to attract people that are going to hurt you. You're going to attract situations that are going to hurt you. Now, we've all ascended to a much higher level than that. But I find that if I am not conscious, I'm one thought and one idea away from slipping back into that embedded theology. I need to be awake to be able to go, nope, that's not my truth anymore. Life is good. Life is for me. So I begin to evolve. But if you're seeing yourself as stained and as a sinner, as wrong and less than, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there may be a reason your life is not working because there's that energy within you. So, if you're holding that God is angry, you're going to experience an angry world. We evolve because that doesn't work for us, right? We've all evolved. And we begin to hold a concept, no, but God is loving. God will take care of you. God is something you can go to that will make things better and okay. And is compassionate and loving just as long as you do it the right way. God will be there as love just as long as you do it His way. Just as long as you follow this narrow path that says this is how you have to be, God will love you. What we've created here in that idea is a God made in man's image. Very jealous. Very egocentric. Yes? But I'll be blessed. I'll be blessed by God, but I have to do things a certain way. And we develop in that relationship of this kind of God a begging, pleading kind of mentality and consciousness. Oh, dear God, please give me the candy. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. I'll never screw up again, God. I'll do it your way. And begging and pleading is a consciousness that says the good that I am seeking is separate from me. Unity does not teach that kind of prayer, that kind of consciousness, that kind of living. Because inherent in a consciousness of please God, please Daddy, give me the candy, you're saying I don't have the candy. It's being withheld from me. And we develop this idea of a capricious God, an entity that says sometimes you get to be blessed and sometimes you don't. I don't believe in that kind of egocentric God anymore. There are days I want, just please give me the candy. I want it and I want it now. This is what Gully writes. He says, it seems contradictory to speak of a God of love who has given us free will and at the same time has devised a precise plan for our lives that must be followed for us to be blessed. It does seem kind of contradictory, right? You have free will. Do whatever you want. But if you don't do it my way, you're in trouble. Unity teaches us there is no capricious universe. There is no capricious God. It is not a personality. It's not a human being. So we evolve to a higher place and begin to move forward with our idea of what God is. And hopefully Stay awake enough that we don't fall back into the trap of thinking that some entity or energy is punishing us or blessing us. And Gully writes, we have that moment of aha awakening where we feel and know the love of God. Who's ever had an aha moment? A moment that happened in your life where it was like you knew there's a God and it's good, and I'm feeling connected to that God. But here's what can happen in those moments, and it happens, I believe, to a great degree. We have a divine encounter so profound for us that we freeze that moment, and we come to the conclusion that it is superior to our neighbor's moment. And we consequently limit the manner in which God is encountered. It's the story of the village. There was a village, and there was a young boy who decided to go for a walk one day in the village. And he went to sit at the stream, and he sat on a rock, and he ate an artichoke. He had an artichoke. And while he was doing this, there was an epiphany. He had an experience of God. He felt a new enlightenment. He knew the radiance of life itself. And he went back and he told the rest of the village what had happened. And they said, "What were you doing? What were you doing?" He said, all I was doing was sitting on a rock eating an artichoke. Well, they went about their day, went to bed that night. The next morning, the boy got up and looked at his village. It was abandoned. Nobody was there. Where he went looking for hours to find them, and he finally went down to the river, and he found the entire village. Every single one of them was sitting on a rock by the river, eating an artichoke, waiting for God. When we begin to say that our way is the only way, we have limited God. We have limited the universe. And I don't know about you, but I love the South. And I love that I can get green beans and tomatoes anywhere in this state of Georgia. And it's God to me. When I eat green beans the way they're cooked here in the South, it's like God. Perhaps God can come through a tomato, a green bean, a pear, whatever it may, a pineapple. And it doesn't have to be an artichoke. But in our journey with God, we begin to say, this felt so good. So it's out of a loving place. This felt so good. This is the only way to experience God. This is the only book that will allow me to experience God. Artichokes is the only way. And we begin to say our neighbor isn't right. Come do it my way. And that's not out of critique of you. That's not out of anything except love. I want to give you the artichoke experience. I want you to have the experience with me as the artichoke too. But inevitably, if we say that God is only going to come through that particular way, we have limited the universe, and we are living in a finite reality that said God and goodness and peace and joy can only come through one way. And what happens? We end up wanting, and we enter a dark night of the soul. Inevitably, there comes a time in our life when our prayers don't get answered. I ate 20 artichokes. I was sitting by the river. I was on the rock. And I'm not getting the answer. My child, I prayed for God as I ate the artichoke. And my child isn't here anymore. And we go to a dark night of the soul. And I'm not going to call the dark night of the soul bad, because it causes us to question. It causes us to look deep. It causes us to begin to look beyond the reality of external artichokes, beyond the external realities, to dig deep, to realize there's something more going on inside of me. There's a deeper truth. There's a more beautiful truth. And my dark night is causing me to question, is there really a God? Anybody go through that part, that phase in your evolution? Is there really a God? How could this happen? This hurts to the core of who I am. And we have people sitting in this room right now that are still in the core of hurting because the prayer wasn't answered the way it was supposed to be answered. I ate the artichoke. What's going on? Gully writes, religion. This is what religion's done for us. Religion is a good thing, but this is what religion has done for us. It demands that we place our faith and our trust in a deity of its own invention. Its own invention, whose track record for alleviating human suffering is very spotty. We have to turn within when we go to that place. Help, I'm on my own. The artichoke isn't working anymore. And then we go to a place of deep, deep pain, and we start blaming God. God's fault? How could God do this? And if we are in a place of relationship with the presence of life itself, of God, that is blame, we are going to show up in our life with relationships that let us down. Relationships that don't show up the way we think they should show up. And there's going to be pain. We are hiring. We are hiring the actors to prove that we are right. But the good thing is, what we come to is an awareness that is at a deeper place. God didn't fail us. God didn't fail us. This is where new thought comes in. We begin to enter the phase of new thought, of metaphysics and unity. And we begin to understand that God is always there. The good is always there. But it's not attached to a physical reality. It's not necessarily attached to a physical reality. But we, as a partner in the creation of life itself, can use the energy of spiritual reality to manifest. Anybody have, this is the movie The Secret. Remember the movie The Secret? All about manifestation. And we turned God into a magnificent vending machine. If I just hold the right thought, all that good is right here. I can create a parking space. Anybody have that when you could create that parking space? I was so egotistically full of myself when I got the front space every single time until I didn't get the front space. But we began to turn God into a vending machine, and we have expectation. As Gully writes, he says, our desire for happiness can grow into an expectation of happiness. And we begin to think that happiness is our due. It is something owed to us by God. Something owed to us. This is the Generation X, is what I say. I've dealt with my daughter. She's in that generation. Not the one that's here, the one that's on the West Coast. But you owe me something. Daddy, you owe me something. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to pay for this. You're supposed to do this and buy me the car and do this. And there's an expectation that no love exists within that field. And we, as metaphysicians, often enter that field. God's working for me now. God is working for me to do things the way I think they should be. And we could create a very egotistical spiritual secret that way. I'm sure you've run into people like that, right? Nobody in the room is like that. It's all about me, myself, and I. And we develop an attitude that the universe owes us something, and it becomes a one-way street. It's all about what I can attain, I can get, I can grab the wealth, and I can get all these wonderful things. And we become spiritually lazy students because we camp out in the manifestation process and then forget that we need to continue to evolve. Oh, for the first time, we're told in a church, you're good, you're wonderful, you're magnificent, you are not stained. That's good, that's evolution. And then we camp out there and we become egotistical spiritual students. And there's a greater experience of God that can come. And so we move forward. When you're in that egotistical place, you may notice that when you're in the manifestation place that it's all about you, guess what kind of people you're magnetizing to your life? A lot of selfish people. You are going to have people show up to say, yes, it's all about me, not about you. And then this conflict begins to happen. And we again are left emptiness. Our relationships leave us empty because everybody's just fighting for their own private good. There is no private good in the world, so we evolve. We come to a greater place, a deeper connection at a spiritual place that says, well, my child might have passed on and didn't get my prayer answered, but I'm still connected. I'm still connected at a much deeper place. And we are in this together. A consciousness begins that says God is all of life. Everything in life is the face of God. The song we sang earlier. And we begin to see that in a relationship with God, to experience the love of God, we need to be more loving. To experience the compassion of God, I need to be more compassionate. To experience the true depth of connection and relationship with God, I need to be the change I want to see in the world. It's no longer about me, it's about us. There is no you or me. There is us. There is no us and them. There is only God. Amen. It says in the book, while we don't fully understand this divine presence, it seems to be calling us toward a life of loving kindness. We evolve to a greater place. In the midst of my pain, can I be more loving? In the midst of my fear, can I be an ambassador of compassion? In the midst of things not going right, can I stand in the fire and allow myself to be purified because I am showing up as the love of God itself. And I begin to ask questions. Does the world need this? Is this good for the collective? Is this good for the whole? Is it good for the community and not is it good for me? And one of my jobs here in this community is to call forth the energy that is not serving the growth of this community. And we have played in the history of this church an energy that's all about me. It is time to evolve. It is about us. It is about what we are demonstrating together as a community and as a family. I'm asking you to elevate your consciousness in regards to the church, in regards to your family, in regards to your work environment, that we are all on the journey together and that we are all the face of God. And to constantly examine when you are that one thought, that one idea, that one experience away going, God is angry, God is fearful, there isn't enough to go around, or it's all about me. You're going to have those thoughts. In this community, we are doing this hand in hand, heart to heart, spirit to spirit, and proving God as family, as one. And when we do that, we go to a Christ consciousness. You know, the Bible is nothing more than the story of the evolution of human consciousness. Adam consciousness, victim consciousness, an angry God, to Christ consciousness. When we begin to really live and breathe and know the truth of our oneness, we develop the Christ consciousness, the consciousness that Jesus had. It is a place, as Gully writes, those who bear this divine presence will not have to point it out to the rest of us. No longer do I need to give lip service to the God that I talk about. No longer do I have to sit in a restaurant and defend the God that we teach at Unity. No longer do I have to know the right scriptures or the right book or the right words to use to defend my God. I'm going to be in the presence and know that who I am speaks about God far louder than any words that I can share. That who I am as a spirit of God is far greater than any wisdom that can spew from my mouth. That I am living as the example of God. Let us live our lives as spiritual seekers on an evolving path. And if you think that it stopped at Christ consciousness, I say you're just in another place of stagnation. There is more God to be revealed in, through, and as you. Whatsoever I do, you will do these things too, the Christ said. He told us, don't stop growing at what I have given you. Build upon that and become more. And I don't know what that more is. I haven't touched it yet. I'm lucky if I once a month get to touch that Christ consciousness. But there is more God to be revealed. Question yourself. Question your community. Question your family. Wrestle with God and wrestle with new ideas. And know that some of it will work, some of it won't work. But you will be more in the presence of God at the end of the journey because you were willing to do that. Let us live our lives in such a way that the presence of God is felt more in who we are and less in what we say. Greater things than I have done will you do. I'm going to leave you with some lyrics to a song I wrote. It was called We Shall Know God. And it was written for another book very much like Philip Gully's book. It was by Deepak Chopra called How to Know God. To me, these lyrics just sum it all up. Out beyond horizons of thought and space and time. Okay, get the lyrics back in my head. Let's start with the second verse. There's I got to sing it. Out beyond horizons of thought and space and time. I'm not coming up with them, so God is telling me don't give you the lyrics. But I'm going to tell you the idea. Out beyond what you have gauged as what God is, as what community is, as what life is a window to a possibility. Open the window. Don't be comfortable in the box. Open the window and know that God is just as big as you're willing God to be. And if you hold on to yesterday's idea about God as the end all, it's complete, it's done, you have stopped growing. God will be bigger than anything you can possibly imagine. Evolve your faith by questioning and being. And as we do this together as a community, we shall know God, we shall know love, we shall know beauty, we shall know peace, we shall know harmony beyond your wildest imagining. I guarantee it. I've lived it. I no longer live with the boogeyman, the God under the bed. I no longer live with the fear. I no longer live with the need to fight against somebody who shows up different That is a result of my questioning. I know it's a result of your questioning because you are proving it as well. Out beyond horizons of thought and space and time, we're going to find that window. And we will find a bigger and bigger and bigger God. And look out. Look out, Unity North. Look out, world. Because we will be a beacon of proving the spiritual principle that we know is true. Yes? So what is the picture you're drawing of God today? Draw the picture. And when you go out here, the world's going to know what God looks like in just a moment. In just a minute, they're going to know what God looks like because you're drawing the picture by being the presence of God. I claim it, I see it, I allow it to be, and I wish you namaste.